Adam dreamed of becoming a police officer since childhood, like many boys born in the 80s. However, over time, events in the country turned some of the dreamers away, but Adam was certain he would become a detective or a forensic specialist, or some other type of crime fighter. His mother, Mrs. Gibson, both supported and opposed her son's idea. The thing was, Adam's father was an undercover agent who died from a gangster's bullet before his son was born. Mrs. Gibson didn't want such a fate for her child, but she couldn't dissuade him either, as she could see that Adam was really passionate about this idea. But after finishing school, things didn't go as planned. During a medical examination, it was suddenly discovered that Adam had heart problems and high blood pressure. Where did it come from? He had always felt fine. They sent him for one test, then another, and while he was being tested, the deadline for submitting documents to the police school had passed. "Don't worry, son, you'll get into some other school next year. The world won't end because you didn't get into this police school," Mrs. Gibson comforted him. "In the meantime, you can help me with the repairs at home. You know my legs are not in great shape." The thing was, even though she wasn't very old, her arthritis was getting worse every year. The doctors just shrugged their shoulders, saying it was probably genetic. The main thing was to prevent it from turning into arthrosis, which would mean disability. Adam took care of his mother as best he could. He did all the heavy housework himself. On the one hand, he was even glad that things turned out the way they did with his admission to the police school. Otherwise, he would have had to leave home, leaving his mother alone with her illness. But he was still disappointed that he didn't get in. Then, in winter, Adam received a military draft notice. "So, I'm not fit for school, but I'm fit for service?" Adam was surprised. But the military enlistment office had its own methods. The doctors deemed Adam perfectly healthy. And his blood pressure? They said it was just his emotions causing his blood pressure to spike. He was healthy. Adam was disappointed. Why did they put him through all those tests if they were just going to draft him anyway instead of letting him study? No, he didn't refuse to serve. He believed that military service was a necessary thing for a man. But in the last few months, he began to think more and more about how his mother would manage without him. Her legs were hurting more and more, and no medication was helping. But Mrs. Gibson insisted that her son go to serve. Although a friend from the clinic suggested a way to get a deferment. "We need to get your son signed up for taking care of you, and then no one will bother him," said the therapist Miss Jackson, a good kind woman who sincerely wanted to help. In the past, she had buried her brother, who had been brought back from Afghanistan in a zinc coffin, and therefore considered military service to be something terrible. And she had known Mrs. Gibson for a long time. She knew how attached she was to her son. "Miss Jackson, I won't do anything," Mrs. Gibson refused, surprising her. "Adam won't say thank you to me first after something like this. He needs the army, no matter how you look at it." And it was true. Adam had already figured out how to get a job in the police, serve first, then go to the simplest position in the police, and then go to school. He wasn't looking for an easy way out, and there wasn't one. They took Adam before the new year, and his mother saw him off at the train station, barely able to stand from anxiety. Adam's friends and classmates came to see him off. Some girls see off their boyfriends to the army, but Adam didn't have anyone. He hadn't had time to befriend anyone yet. He ended up in a military school in a tank unit. Mrs. Gibson was especially pleased with this. At that time, another military conflict was just beginning in one of the regions. It was good that her son was away from it all. It was better to be where the peace was now. But then a troubling message came from Adam, saying that he was being transferred to another region. And then a mother's heart froze with fear. Would her beloved child end up in the hell that they show on TV every day? And that's exactly what happened. Mrs. Gibson found out at the military registration and enlistment office only after persistent questioning that her son was taking part in hostilities. "Yes, your son is there. And if he's not writing, it's because he doesn't have time to write there, you have to understand. Mrs. Gibson understood that and went to the church every day, lighting candles and praying to the Virgin Pamela for her son's safety, to keep him from death and injury. From time to time, Mrs. Gibson would receive short messages from Adam, but they were always brief and lacking in detail. He would say things like, "I'm alive and well, everything is okay." But Mrs. Gibson knew that she couldn't ask him for more information. She wanted to know how he was eating, how he was resting, and if things were really as bad as they seemed on TV. Maybe they were exaggerating everything. But then, even these short messages stopped coming. Mrs. Gibson checked the mailbox several times a day, and even went to the post office to see if any letters had been lost, but the young postal worker, Laura, assured her that she was paying close attention to all the mail. "You should go to the military enlistment office," Laura suggested. Mrs. Gibson didn't say anything in response. She knew that was where she needed to go, but she kept putting it off, as if she were afraid of hearing something terrible. Eventually, she had to go. At the enlistment office, she was sent from one room to another, walking back and forth and trying not to notice the pain in her knees. She hoped to hear that her worries were unfounded. Finally, she was called in to see the military commissioner. He remained silent for a long time, looking down and lost in thought. Finally, he looked up and spoke to her directly. "Be strong," he said. "Your son is missing in action. There was a heavy battle, and he was not found among the wounded or the dead." "Where is he?" Mrs. Gibson asked, trembling with fear. "He was taken prisoner, but he was not among those released in that area." "What do I do now?" Mrs. Gibson asked tearfully. "Pray," the commissioner replied quietly. "And if we hear anything, we will let you know." Mrs. Gibson nodded and left the office. Tears clouded her vision, and her head was foggy. The pain in her legs was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. Where was her son, her Adam? In captivity? What was happening to him? They say that these bandits have no mercy, that they do whatever they can to torment their prisoners. As Mrs. Gibson imagined her child suffering, she felt sick to her stomach. She collapsed, unconscious, near a bus stop, and passers-by called an ambulance. "You've had a heart attack," the doctor told her in the hospital. "Stay with us and get better. Everything will be fine, just no negative emotions." "But what do I have to be happy about, doctor?" Mrs. Gibson cried. "My son is in captivity and no one can say anything for sure, where he is, what's happened to him, whether he's alive or dead." The doctor couldn't find anything to say in response. What can you say in a situation like this? Only a sedative could have helped the distressed woman. A year passed since Adam disappeared without a trace. Nothing was ever said to Mrs. Gibson, no matter where she turned, both to the military authorities and to civilians. She was advised to contact the Committee of Mothers. Everyone who could searched for any information about Adam, but there was complete silence. No one had seen Adam, dead or alive, as if he had vanished into thin air. 3 years later, Mrs. Gibson found a former comrade in arms of Adam's. They had been together in that region, but Martin couldn't say anything coherent. By that time, he was already a heavy drinker and suffered from mental confusion. When Mrs. Gibson entered his apartment, he was just drunk again. He listened to the mother and smirked. "Consider your son lucky. He didn't suffer long. He's lying somewhere in the ground, and here. I crush worms every night. Worms, worms." He screamed and covered his head with his hands. Mrs. Gibson recoiled from him and barely made it out of the room, coming face to face with Martin's tormented mother. "Don't take to heart what he said," the woman said with a heavy sigh. "Ever since he came back from the army, he's been having a terrible time with his head. He used to be such a bright boy, studying physics and mathematics in college. He flunked his exams, got drafted into the army, and then the war happened. He got wounded, came home, and started drinking. Then he began having hallucinations. He was in the hospital, but it was all for nothing. He still drinks and crushes these imaginary worms. What worms? Mrs. Gibson whispered in horror. The ones in a dead body. My son's seen them, the mother wiped away her tears. Mrs. Gibson left them with a heavy heart. Thoughts of what her son had to endure, looking at poor Martin, only made it worse. And Mrs. Gibson's health was getting worse every year. Now she walked with a cane and it was very difficult for her. Her heart still hurt. Sometimes at night, the woman whispered, God, take me to yourself. If my son is with you, I will find peace. And if he is alive, then take my life in exchange for his. Thus the unhappy mother suffered, and lived on. And Adam often appeared in her dreams, often as a child. Here they are, going to the kindergarten for the first time. He is capricious, he doesn't want to let go of his mom. And here, on September 1st, Adam has such a huge bouquet of gladioli. And it seems like these are just dreams, but they resemble memories more and more, because that's how it was in reality. But one night she had a dream that Mrs. Gibson woke up from in horror. Mama, her missing son, said to her in the dream, I am underground. But I am alive. Help me. Alive, but underground. That night the woman didn't close her eyes. She lay there and thought. No, she's a modern person and doesn't believe in any mysticism. She goes to church, yes, but that's a little different. But this dream is so strange and Adam is in it. No, she doesn't see him, she just hears his voice. So dear. Her little son is alive, he must be alive. The next morning, Mrs. Gibson started calling all the organizations that deal with missing people with renewed vigor. By that time, the war had already ended. Many people were released from captivity, but Adam was not among them. But the mother remembered her dream, her son's words, he's underground. Maybe it's some kind of basement or underground room. Maybe they're keeping my boy there, that's why they can't find him? She asked the people searching for him. No one could give her a definite answer. And soon the search for Adam was stopped altogether. 10 years had passed, and no one had searched for Adam anymore. Mrs. Gibson had tried everything she could think of, but it was all in vain. She wrote letters to the television stations and newspapers, but there was no response. No one ever read her letters, it seemed, or perhaps they just didn't think it was important enough. She even went to a fortune teller, who told her that her son was alive, but that only deepened the wound in Mrs. Gibson's heart that refused to heal. All the stress and worry had made Mrs. Gibson gray as snow by the time she was 50. She had been disabled for a long time and could only move around the house with the help of a walker, and outside, she used a wheelchair. A social worker named Melanie had been assigned to her. She was about the same age as Mrs. Gibson but a bit gruff and cantankerous. Despite her difficult personality, Melanie was thorough. She found out that Mrs. Gibson needed a special massage for her arthritis, but the clinic refused to give her a referral unless she paid for it. Where is she supposed to get the money? Melanie fumed. All she has is her disability pension. Her son disappeared during the war. Can't someone help her out? Finally, through social services, Melanie managed to find a massage therapist for Mrs. Gibson. The woman who came was in her 40s, petite, with sad blue eyes. Pamela did an excellent job with the massage, and Mrs. Gibson's leg muscles felt energized afterward. They got to talking, and Pamela revealed that she was actually a surgeon by profession. But after certain events in my life, Pamela sighed, I can't hold a scalpel anymore. So I learned massage instead. And you know what? I don't regret it. I love my work. Mrs. Gibson simply nodded in response, not wanting to pry into the reason for Pamela's career change. They were sitting in the living room, chatting over a cup of tea, and there was an album of family photos on the coffee table. Mrs. Gibson showed Pamela the album, and when Pamela saw a photo of Adam in his military uniform, a portrait taken before he took his oath, she froze. "Is this your Adam?" she asked Mrs. Gibson. "Yes, my little boy." "I think I know him," Pamela finally said after a moment of silence, still looking at the photograph. "Although he looked different back then. But it's definitely him." "Pamela, for God's sake, tell me where you saw my son," Mrs. Gibson begged. And then Pamela, sighing, began her story. She was almost 30, with a medical degree under her belt. She had recently married a surgeon named Edgar. One day, they were offered a job in a war-torn region. Apparently, the local hospital had lost one surgeon to death and another had fled. The civilian population was also getting sick and injured. The town was far from the city and had a population of about 5,000. Pamela and Edgar thought it was the right decision to go. They were promised good money and would return home after working for the required time. They would even be able to buy an apartment with their earnings. But everything went wrong. They did arrive in the village and treated patients for almost a month. But one night, bandits came to them. They needed them to come and examine their wounded. They claimed to have their own doctor, but he had recently been killed. Edgar refused to help them and pointed to the door. And then they shot him in front of Pamela's eyes. "You're a surgeon too, aren't you?" One of the bandits sneered at Pamela, who was crying over her husband's lifeless body. "Get ready to go." Pamela refused, but they didn't kill her. The bandits just grabbed her, tied her up, put some kind of bag over her head and took her somewhere. Once they arrived at the location, they freed her next to an injured person's bed. All the medicines and tools were already there. Pamela realized she had no choice. She did the surgery as best she could, warning that the patient needed to be taken to the hospital. But who listened to her? They just aimed a gun at her and she had to do everything under field conditions. Then they took her somewhere. From fragments of words, she understood that she was unlikely to be left alive. They pushed her somewhere, and she fell down into a deep pit filled with straw. The top was covered with a strong grid. After looking closely, she saw a boy lying on the straw. Pamela realized that he was most likely concussed. He was not doing well, and she couldn't help him with anything, no medicine, no water. So the two of them sat in the pit until dawn. In the morning, Pamela examined his face well, he was just a boy. But he didn't say his name or anything else. He couldn't even say a word. Then they took Pamela out and led her somewhere again. Ben, a young bandit, was there. Pamela realized where they were going. "Listen," she said, overcoming her fear, "let me go. I did everything your bosses wanted." The boy was silent, but when he brought her to the edge of a ravine, he suddenly fired into the air. "Run away from here," he said through his teeth. Pamela didn't have to ask twice. Soon she was back with her own people, telling them about the boy. "Either they'll shoot him or they'll make him work," they explained to her. "The second option is unlikely." Soon the village was liberated, but they never found that boy. And Pamela, after all she had been through, she couldn't work as a surgeon anymore. That's the story. "That boy, he looks just like your son," Pamela finally said, looking Mrs. Gibson in the eyes. "So you're saying they didn't find him when they liberated the village?" Mrs. Gibson said, wiping away tears. "But they didn't see him dead either," Pamela replied. Women stood frozen, looking at each other. They understood everything without words, and just a few days later, Pamela was pushing a wheelchair along the platform with Mrs. Gibson sitting in it. They were both heading to the place where 10 years ago Pamela had last seen Adam. The village now seemed less ominous than it remained in Pamela's memory, an ordinary mountain village with peaceful people living here. People are building a house over there. And someone is herding sheep in the distance by the mountains. Children are playing with a ball. A normal life, as if there was no pain and fear here before. Two women, one pushing the other in a wheelchair, walked along the street. What do you want? An old man in a high fur hat glared at them from behind the fence. Who are you? Pamela was even confused, remembering what she had to go through here, pain, fear, and the loss of her loved one. And she was already mentally scolding herself. Why did she come here? There is no strength to stay here. And what will they find here? So many years have passed. But Mrs. Gibson was determined. She had been knocking on the doors of various organizations for years, asking to find her son, hoping for someone. But now she herself was where they had seen her son. Let his be there a long time ago, but he was there. And now Mrs. Gibson will find out everything, no matter how difficult it may be. I'm sorry, Mrs. Gibson pulled out a photo of Adam. I'm looking for my son. He disappeared in your area during the war. Many disappeared here, the old man grumbled. It was a bad and terrible time. You should leave here. If your son hasn't shown up in all these years, then he's no longer in this world. Please, just take a look, Mrs. Gibson almost pleaded. I came to you from far away, I've traveled thousands of miles. The old man casually took the photo, glanced at it, and then his expression changed. You say he's your son? He said in surprise. Yes, Adam is my son. Mrs. Gibson froze with excitement. Do you know something? Well, he looks like my shepherd, the old man answered somewhat perplexedly. Don't get me wrong, I don't keep him like a slave. Just when the war ended here, I found him half dead in one of the pits and pulled him out. I wanted to give him to your people, but they didn't want to take him. They said he would die anyway, and then they would have to deal with the burden. They just asked to bury him here, but the guy survived. My wife put him back on his feet. So he survived, but he lost his memory. I just called him Jerry all these years. Why didn't anyone inform us? Pamela asked in shock when she regained consciousness. Why should I? The old man sincerely wondered. I healed him, he worked for me, and I never mistreated him. What about the fact that his mother went insane, shedding tears all this time? Did you not think about that? Pamela protested. The old man just shook his head, as if he had no concern for the worries of a stranger. Quiet, Pamela, quiet, Mrs. Gibson said softly. Let's wait for Jerry. Maybe it's not Adam after all. When is your employee bringing the sheep? Soon, replied the old man, clearly regretting what he had said. If this Jerry was indeed Adam, then he would be left without a free worker. Soon, sheep bleated on the edge of the village, and a shepherd appeared. Mrs. Gibson scrutinized the man's overgrown face and could not tell if it was her son or not. Only when she got close did her heart skip a beat. Yes, it was her Adam. Older, with deep-set blue eyes and a beard. But it was him, her son. Who are you? The man asked, looking surprised at the thin woman in the wheelchair. I'm your mother, Mrs. Gibson replied, holding back tears and reaching out to him. Adam hesitantly reached out to her. He didn't remember her at all. Like everything from his past life, the war erased it all. But now a new life was beginning for him. Then came the journey home, the long walks to government offices, restoring documents, and all that. With time, Adam's memory returned. He learned to live again, and so did Mrs. Gibson. She even felt better. Pamela, their good family friend, was there for them. There was much more ahead, but the most important thing was done. A mother had found her son. Now Mrs. Gibson knew one must never lose hope. Even when everyone else no longer believes, a mother's heart can work wonders.